Hey everybody, let's talk a couple of TV shows that I've seen. And by TV shows, I mean actually shows streaming directly on two platforms, Netflix and Amazon. First up, let's talk about Marvel's Defenders miniseries. This is the big build-up from Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist into their own Avengers-style team-up on Netflix. I've enjoyed the Marvel shows so far that Netflix has to offer. And I've already given my thoughts on Daredevil Season 1, Daredevil Season 2, and Jessica Jones. But before getting into Defenders, I need to give you my kind of quick thoughts on the other two series, Luke Cage and Iron Fist, since I never did a proper review for those shows. Luke Cage, for the first, I want to say 75% of the show, is solid. I like Mike Colter as Luke Cage. I liked the story, and I liked his build-up to confrontation with Cottonmouth. Needless to say, there's going to be some spoilers here, but it's around the time Cottonmouth is done away with in the show that the quality, I felt, started to kind of sag. It wasn't terrible, but it was a trend that I noticed Marvel started taking with these shows after that, wherein whenever something really interesting is taking place with a character, they immediately kind of nix it for another character they feel they need to build up. And then that's when you kind of lose a little bit of the momentum in the series. So overall, Luke Cage was fine and fun and enjoyable, but I started to kind of notice a shift in quality in the last portion of the run. Iron Fist, I agree with the majority there, where I feel it is a stupid show, but I still took enjoyment from how stupid it was. Finn Jones, he's not leading man material. He's a better supporting player, like in something like Game of Thrones, where you have him working off of a principal cast. He can do well with that, but if you're asking him to anchor a show with his performance, he really didn't do a great job of that in this first season. Maybe part of it is his fault, maybe another part of it is the fact that the show was felt really jumbled. At least there was some kind of degree of what the hell is this about that kept me invested in the show. Not so much in the actual story or characters, but just watching it, how much off the rails it could get. It's enjoyable. There were things that I did genuinely like about the series. I did like, what's his name? Meacham, the eldest Meacham son, the one who looks like John Malkovich. I thought he was really solid in his character arc. Colleen Wing, she was really enjoyable. In fact, she shows up in Defenders, and I keep wondering the same thing I wondered in Iron Fist is, why isn't she the focus of the show? But stuff like the obvious stunt double fights and Finn Jones' performance and some of the effects work, it was definitely the lowest quality of these series so far. At least the first season of Daredevil and the first season of Jessica Jones, they kind of tested my expectations for what I was going into these shows for. Daredevil Season 1 especially kind of defied my expectations of what a Daredevil show could be. Pushed the boundaries of the storytelling in making me believe that a guy wearing just plain black Under Armour stuff and a sock over his head could evolve into what we know to be mainstream Daredevil, going from this rough and tumble vigilante to the urban legend of Hell's Kitchen, this infamous legendary superhero of Hell's Kitchen. And his arc, connected with D'Onofrio's Kingpin arc, that made for a very solid season that challenged me a little bit. Jessica Jones grappled with some very dark, very unsettling material, lacing it with a little bit of some detective or film noir aspects, but still trying to center it all around this superhero. And in turn, that challenged a lot of my emotional and mental expectations for it. And I was much more engaged with it because the leads were able to keep the believability going for these circumstances. Luke Cage did that for the most part, but then, like I said, the quality slacked off. Iron Fist kind of stayed at a baseline of ridiculous, and I wasn't really expecting great things with regards to characterization or themes from Iron Fist. It was a dumb superhero show. It was a CW show, a DC CW show in Marvel drag, essentially. And I know there's going to be a lot of people out there, big DC CW fans out there, who are probably thinking like, oh, you're using CW as a negative connotation. Not entirely. The CW does a great job with its superhero properties, but it's not putting them out there expecting you to get anything bigger than dumb, fun, superhero action, schlock, and drama. That's what those shows excel at. And good for them. That's why they're so popular. That's why people tune into them. They're looking for that superhero comfort food. The Marvel Netflix stuff doesn't feel like superhero comfort food. It feels like a superhero kind of filet mignon that you need to kind of take a piece of, roll it around in your mouth, get a sense of the flavor and taste of it, and then finish it off with a nice, a nice Melback or something. Wine. The Defenders feels like an Outback steak. Like a piece of prime rib from Outback Steakhouse that you pair off with a Tall Foster's. It's fine. It's what it does well. And it's perfectly serviceable as a superhero show. But as anything else other than just this series where all these characters team up, there's nothing else bigger at play with it. The leads are still fine, with the Finn Jones exception. Well, I'm not even going to say that. He does okay against these leads. And that's the thing, is he's kind of relegated to the fourth wheel on this tricycle. When he works off of Charlie Cox and Mike Coulter and Kristen Ritter, when they're in that scene from the trailer in the Chinese restaurant, and he's playing it a little bit more for comedy, and he's kind of the doofy one out of the group, and a lot of jokes are kind of at Iron Fist's expense, it's fine, and he plays well with them. Sigourney Weaver is without a doubt the highlight of the series. Her arc plays into that Marvel trend now of she's only going to be in about 75 to 80% of the show, and then she's going to be switched out in favor of another antagonist, in this case, Elodie Young's Elektra. And while Elodie Young does well with this Elektra, it's the best live-action Elektra we've had, which, I mean, isn't saying a lot, probably, because it's been her and Jennifer Garner. I mean, she's still a good actress, and I like what they have offered for this character arc for Elektra, but when you're riding the high of seeing Sigourney Weaver be the primary villain and immediately just do away with her in the next episode in favor of Elektra, really kills the momentum for me in this series. Like, I was really looking forward to seeing things through to the end with Sigourney Weaver, just because I was really interested in seeing her perspective on this. She's playing cold and calculating, but there's a little bit of a motherly aspect to her, especially with her relationship to Elektra as her peon. Now, I felt like kind of was a cheap dodge on Marvel's part. I mean, everything else is fine. The action's fine. For the most part, characterization and acting is solid. But it's just that. It's just solid. It doesn't really take the material to anywhere transcendental or anything, you know, beyond what you were expecting. This is very much what I was expecting the Defenders to be. Nothing more, nothing less. And in that much, this is why the Defenders feels like the most CW-ish out of all of these series so far. It's extremely safe, kind of cliched at certain points with regards to dialogue and with regards to plot twists, but it does them well. And if you've been a fan of the Marvel stuff thus far on Netflix, you can continue into this and not have any major gripes. Like, I'm actually kind of just nitpicking, but at the same time, I don't have a strong response to the series either way. I don't loathe it. I don't love it. It's there and it's fine. It's a good length for a miniseries like this. Like, if it had gone into 13-episode territory, I might have a little bit more to complain about because I don't feel there was enough even here to balance out 8 episodes. But for an 8-episode run, I feel that's perfectly adequate for the story they want to tell. I do kind of hope we're done talking about the Hand for a while. I feel that as a villain and as an adversary has been played out, not just in this series, but in Iron Fist and in a couple of the other shows. So I'm ready to move on to other subject matter than ninjas and mystical stuff. So yeah, I'd recommend the Defenders to anyone who's, you know, been watching the Netflix stuff so far. It's fine. It's okay. Alright, let's move on to Amazon's The Tick, because I've been a fan of this franchise since I was, I want to say, about 9 or 10. I first became aware of The Tick through the animated series that used to air on Fox Kids, and enjoyed the show, thought it was funny, and at that time was really into superhero comics even more so than I am now, which is barely into superhero comics these days. Was even aware of a little bit of the meta humor and a little bit of the satire they're trying to make with The Tick animated. And then I started to read the black and white comic books done by Ben Edlund and really enjoyed those runs. Like, he sends up a lot of trends in comic books at the time, a lot better than some satirists do these days with other shows or other comics. Like, he did a whole 4-issue run with the Tick, and when it first started with Ninjas in the City, tying in a little bit to the Daredevil and Frank Miller stuff. Even had an Elektra-ish character the Tick teamed up with named Oedipus, and had a character named Paul the Samurai who fought villains with his katana baked into a baguette. I mean, he's beating ninjas senseless with a long baguette. I mean, that's kind of hilarious. I felt the black and white comics, the original comics done by Edlund, were really solid and had plenty of silly stuff taking place, but also very mature at times. They went from animated series to the first live action series in the early 2000s, I want to say. The one with Patrick Warburton as a Tick, where it was more of like a Seinfeld with superheroes premise. Less focused on action and actual, comic book storylines in favor of comedy. I felt that was actually a really solid one-season wonder. Patrick Warburton, I thought, did a great job as a Tick. Everyone else in the supporting roles were really good. I like the guest stars they got on there, from Kurt Fuller from Ghostbusters 2 to Dave Foley to Ron Perlman showed up as a superhero at one point. Overall, a really solid show, but this is around the time Fox was American Idol, or in that time, like, reality show heavy. And if it wasn't reality show based, chances are it wasn't going to last past its first season. So the Tick was, unfortunately, I feel, one of those casualties of the early 2000s, kind of killing off any and all interesting shows in favor of reality show garbage. And so when I heard that Amazon was going to take a stab at the Tick property, I was definitely curious, because especially when I saw that it was going to kind of have showrunners and have people directing it that had worked in grittier superhero fare, like the pilot episode, which aired many months ago, actually, before the rest of the season came out just a couple of weeks ago, was directed by Christopher Nolan, I feel his director of photography throughout the Batman trilogy. And you can tell that it's directed by someone who worked with Christopher Nolan, because that pilot episode is very dark, very gritty and grimy. At times, the action and the story gets a little too serious for my taste, personally, especially when you try to balance it out with the comedic aspect of the Tick. But it was okay. I mean, Peter Serafinowicz does a pretty good job as a Tick, in my opinion. It's a different take, and he's channeling way more Adam West than Warburton or Townsend Coleman did in the animated series. So it's something that your adult mind picks up on, is a little bit more of the send up to other superhero properties like that, like the Adam West delivery in his performance. But he works fine. His dynamic with Arthur, not just in the pilot, but throughout the 6-episode run, is perfectly fine. My main thing about the Tick series on Amazon now is that it feels like even when you get to the conclusion of the season, it still is not sure what exactly the balance should be between comedy and superhero serious antics. Because there's this plot thread of this conspiracy Arthur's trying to unravel regarding one of the big supervillains of the 20th century, the Terror, still being alive and running things behind the scenes. The Terror is played by Jackie Earle Haley, and it just feels like Jackie Earle Haley got off of the Nightmare reboot set and is just continuing being Freddy Krueger, just in a different makeup. Yeah, there's kind of this conspiracy theory feel going for it at times. There's a little bit of tragedy laced in Arthur's background now with regards to his views on superheroics and supervillains. There are times where you kind of wonder if the Tick's a real person or if he's just a figment of Arthur's kind of disturbed imagination. But then later on in the series, when other people start interacting with the Tick, it's firmly established that the Tick is real. But for the first 2 episodes especially, it feels like they're playing with is the Tick real, or is Arthur just imagining him? Some of the comedy works, some of it doesn't, but I feel that's par for the course with the Tick, is that the more satirical stuff plays better than some of the weird tangents the Tick can get on with regards to metaphorical dialogue and things like that. There's some pretty interesting aspects, and mostly kind of centered around like who they get to play what. Alan Tudyk voices one of the characters' talking boat. There's this Deathstroke, Punisher-y type of character that Arthur and the Tick team up with later on in the series, and his vehicle is a talking boat like Knight Rider. and Alan Tudyk is the voice. And again, like this character is talking about like this serious conspiracy to unravel the terrorist network and things like that. And then you have Alan Tudyk voice coming out of this little security camera going around the boat being like, I was just completing one of my jobs, sir, or whatever. I don't know. I can't remember. It is a strange show, but I feel that is par for the course with The Tick. And if you're a fan of the Tick franchise, this is a curiosity that I feel you can indulge. Again, it's a short enough run. It's only 6 episodes, and they're a half hour each. So it's not that big of a commitment. And it doesn't feel like the worst thing ever they could do with The Tick. Because this premise and this property is ridiculous right out of the gate. You're able to allow a little wiggle room for how ridiculous it can be. And so while this version definitely tries to take itself a little bit more seriously than previous versions, there's still, I feel, plenty of stuff there that die-hard Tick fans will enjoy. So those are my recommendations for Defenders and The Tick. They're both perfectly okay. And if you're a fan of any of those properties or have had a long-term investment in Marvel Netflix or a long-term investment in The Tick, you'll find gold nuggets throughout to take value from. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the TV stuff. I just want to give you those quick reviews. I'm working on some things here pretty soon with regards to Let Me Get This Straight. More movie reviews hopefully coming soon, as well as hopefully more commentary tracks. And oh yeah, speaking of actual TV shows that were on TV, Twin Peaks. Oh boy, Twin Peaks.